Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eric Lanask with TMC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's live webinar. Today's event is called Advanced VoIP Troubleshooting with Qrystal, one-way audio or one-way voice. Uh, we live in a world, we all know this, where texting and social media, email, chat, and all those things have really become key mediums for communication in both personal and business interactions. And yeah, there's good reason for it. But despite the growth and emergence of all of these nonverbal channels, voice remains critical. Uh, I'd argue that it's still the most important channel. Often it's the most convenient channel, maybe when you're driving, which is a time when a lot of people today reserve for making calls to maximize their use of their time during the day. Voice is often also much better equipped for interactions when you've got to have longer conversations, when you're dealing with sensitive issues, conference calls, or when you have to work through complex problems or conversations. And let's face it, we don't have conference texts. Really, when push comes to shove, in terms of customer service, let's say, people really still use voice for their important issues. At the end of the day, it's a more personal channel and it allows for better relationships and interactions. I mean, could you imagine us conducting this webinar over chat? My point is there are a lot of reasons why voice is not going away, why it remains so important, despite what some advocates of messaging and other digital channels might have us believe. But it's not all that rosy. Have you ever been on a call? I'm sure we all have. You started talking, and eventually you figure out that one side of the call or the other isn't able to hear who's speaking, but neither side really understands what's going on. So they both keep asking, "Can you hear me? Are you there?" Those kinds of things. We've all been in those situations, and we know that one-way audio is more than just a nuisance. It's a real problem, and it can result in major mistakes, miscommunication, lost business. And frankly, it makes people want to avoid voice instead of using it more, and opt for less effective and more time consuming channels for their communication. As a provider, you want to avoid these problems at all costs. It creates negative customer experiences. It can result in lost revenue. And knowing how quick people are to share their negative experiences today, word can spread very quickly that you've got an unreliable service. So we know it's a problem. The question is, how do you identify it? What can you do about it? How can you ensure that your voice service delivers consistently high quality two-way audio? And that's what we're here to find out today. To talk about the causes of one-way audio and ways to avoid it, I'm happy to be joined by Dr. Michael Walbaum, who is the Product Marketing Director at Voipfuture. Michael, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your day to share your expertise with our audience today. Before I hand over today's session to you, let me just add a couple of quick programming notes for those in our audience. Uh, Hopefully you'll have some questions for Michael during today's presentation. I encourage you to submit your questions using the interface on your screens. We've left some time for Q&A at the end of his presentation. And for any follow-up questions, or if you want for more information from Voipfuture, or if you just want to share today's on-demand version with colleagues who haven't been able to join us live, all of that detail will be in a follow-up email to you tomorrow. So with that, it is my pleasure to hand over today's event to Dr. Michael Walbaum.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. Actually, Eric did an excellent job in introducing the problem, although honestly speaking, I think one-way voice is probably one of the best known and nastiest problem for operations of VoIP services. So, it doesn't really matter whether you can be heard, but you don't hear the incoming audio, or the other way around, or both sides can't hear each other. It's a nuisance for the users, and it has a lot of names: one-way voice, single-sided calls, one-way calls, silent calls, whatever. If you look for this on the web, you'll find a lot of information and tips on how to troubleshoot this issue. but whichever way you look at it, it's probably one of the nastiest issues that you can deal with, because if there's audio missing, how can you look for something that's not there? And actually, when we at Voipfuture, we have a lot of VoIP service providers as customers all over the world using our tool, and over the years we have collected a lot of information and have helped our customers in a lot of different cases of one-way voice. And I can already tell you that one of the reasons why it is such a nasty problem and so difficult to troubleshoot is that actually each of the cases that we were involved in was different, from very different to just a flavor of the same thing. So, so basically, what I'm going to show you today is like give you some knowledge about the different reasons, like categories of reasons, and what you will also need to solve one-way voice is not only knowledge about the different reasons, but also effective tools to detect and fix these issues. And we'll have a little introduction into how you can use Voipfuture Qrystal for this purpose, and I guess it will also become clear when we talk about the reasons why, let's say, Wireshark or your typical signaling monitoring tool won't do. Okay, so let's get started. 4 reasons of one-way voice. Number 1, that's the missing RTP stream or missing RTP packets, and I guess that's almost the most obvious one. So actually, you have one-way voice because the packets are not delivered to either one or even both of the call parties. So here in this animation at the bottom, you see that the stream from B party to A party is blocked by network element 1, and it is not forwarded then to the A party. And this may be, misconfiguration of firewalls and other network elements. We've seen routers stop transmission of packets, or simply firewall rules that hit for whatever reasons. But it can also be software bugs that cause the RTP transmission to stop. And that could actually even be not just a network element in the network, but it could also be the RTP senders themselves. One other reason, by the way, and we'll have a case, a real life case, talking about this later on, is that it can also be that simply the senders were too optimistic and send their packets with a too low hop count, and the network elements just drop the packets on the way. We'll see that later on. Reason number 2, silent payload. And I guess this is an obvious one, a simple one. Luckily, a reason for silent voice or one-way calls that is becoming less and less frequent. It often happens when you have wrongly configured or, again, buggy media gateways, typically in hybrid calls. So we've seen Cisco media gateways do this because there was some clock counter overflowing or whatever, and the same reason why it gives you one-way voice also caused ghost voices, or let's say you typically call that crosstalk in the early days. So you had basically other voices in your own audio. But as I said, luckily, as we're moving more and more towards all IP end-to-end VoIP calls, this is becoming less frequent, and so I think we'll see not much of this in the future. Reason number 3, multiple streams. And internally, you see that in the title, we call that case zombie streams for short. We'll have a specific customer case on this also a bit later. And then you will understand why, or actually is also easy to understand. You have the case that actually you don't have too few RTP packets, but you have too many. And actually the receiver is getting 2 RTP streams, or maybe even more. We haven't seen that yet, but of course that's possible. And in that case, the receiver may need to choose one stream, and he then may choose the wrong one, which contains silence in the audio. And one could think that actually the receiver could be mixing the audio in those 2 or n streams that it is getting. But actually mixing is a very costly function, and therefore this rarely happens in practice. And so typically the B, well, in this case the B party, but the receiver of multiple streams will just play out, select the first packet that arrives and use that to play out the audio, whatever that may be then. Reason number 4, and this is actually, I guess, the most unexpected reason. Actually, it's also because of unexpected packets. This happens when there is an irregular RTP stream. And although packets arrive, the receiver just ignores them because they're not, what the receiver of those packets is expecting, or what it's programmed to do. So let's say A party sends a bunch of RTP packets to the B party, all fine. The B party places them out, but then something happens, and in this case, the RTP stack of the A party is reset. And actually, this happens more often than you think. Still not, in less than 1% of the cases, but in large networks we see it all over. As you know, each RTP packet has a sequence number, and use that to detect packet loss. So every packet sequence number is increasing. And now what happens is when this RTP stack resets, then it starts the sequence numbering again from 0. Now, if the B party, let's say the last packet it received and played out had the number 1000, then the next one it would expect would be the packet with the number 1001 or anything bigger, because it could be that 10 or 100 packets are lost. That's fine, but the packets numbering should always be bigger unless you have a wraparound. But let's not get into the details. But here in this case, instead of the packet 1001, the receiver gets the packet number 0. And actually, now it depends on the receiving device what happens next. And you could have a receiving device, a user agent, which is very easygoing, and it will play out any packet that it receives. Or you could have strict devices saying, nope, I'm going to wait for my packet 1001. I'm not interested in this funny packet with a sequence number of 0. And actually, there are picky devices like this, and we've had a case with the major tier 1 where this actually happened to one entire government agency which had phones only from one vendor with a picky RTP stack. So you can imagine what kind of escalation that resulted in. So we've seen, we've basically touched the 4 reasons for one-way voice. Like I said, there's differences. So here in this case, unexpected or unusual packets. You can think of a number of other things that can go wrong with an RTP packet. We'll talk about that later. Let's just have a look at 2 cases, actual customer cases, things that happened in live, in both cases tier 1 networks and service providers. So the first one is actually the zombie stream case. And what happened was that an enterprise customer of that service provider, from day 1, actually, since they hooked him up onto the voice service, VoIP service, complained that the calling party could not be heard. So only for outbound calls. So the enterprise staff could not be heard by their own customer. And there was no pattern really that was immediately visible. So the customer was asked to report those incidents. And as you can see, and there was like a series of days, like from the 12th of December to the 20th, and you can see that actually this happened more than once a day on average. And I can already tell you that after we found out the reason, we knew, or we found out that actually the number of incidents was actually factor of 100 more often. So actually, yeah, multiply everything by 100 and you get the real number of cases of one-way voice with that one customer. And remember, actually, these reports were more or less requested by the customer, so there were people taking care that this was coming in. So probably the real ratio is even much lower. So what happened? We started an investigation, and what we figured was that there was a bug in the Cisco call manager in the CUCM. That caused the CUCM to not stop sending RTP for some specific calls, and it would just continue sending packets forever and ever until the call manager was restarted. And so because these streams didn't have a call context anymore, because the signaling was done, the call from a signaling perspective ended properly, just this RTP stream was still there, we started calling those streams zombie streams. So now what happened for those calls that then ended up as being one-way voice, so when an unlucky person started a new call, and being unlucky, it would get the same destination IP and port as used by this zombie stream. Then what would happen was that you would get a race condition, and the never-ending, the zombie stream containing the silence would typically be received first by the receiver. The receiver picked the silent stream to play out and would just simply discard the valid stream containing the voice of the actual call. So I think this was for us initially really surprising, because you look at the trace or you look at the data, and you see streams are arriving. There's even too many streams arriving after you look more closely, but that this could actually be a reason of one-way voice was even to us quite a surprise. Let's look at the second case. We call that one internally 2 suites in Germany. It's actually a case of no packets, and for the industry as such, a quite interesting and telling one, or we could also call it good news, I would say. But for those 2 suites who were roaming in Germany, both customer of the same Swedish carrier and both using the same roaming network in Germany. They tried to call each other, what you would expect, silent call, so they couldn't hear each other. And from a signaling perspective, all was fine. Again, so call was properly set up and actually later on also torn down, but both reported not being able to hear the other side. So what you see here is a sketch of the networking situation, and I don't know, I hope you can see my mouse. So basically the packets were going from the caller, the RTP packets from the caller via the German carrier, and you see the path like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the caller in the same German carrier network. And when we looked into the monitoring data, we saw that actually the packets were lost or they disappeared between the monitoring points 4 and 5. So here in the German carriers international wholesale network. And what happened was, so here we have the animation, and what happened actually was that the route was longer than the time to live of the packets, than the maximum hop count. So the caller would send the RTP IP packets with a time to live of 64. And obviously this here is a simplified version of the network. So actually the 64 hops were over on the way back from the Swedish carrier to the German carrier. And the packets had a time to live of 0, and the router had no other option but to discard the packets. So this was really interesting case, because I mean that really means that we have international calls going on which are voice over IP end to end, and this actually also means that we all need to take more care about the time to live, because I think the default after seeing this should be time to live of 128, so you can make sure that not only within Europe, but also, let's say, from the US to Australia, international calls will work. So, so you know the reasons. We saw a couple of real cases. What I didn't show you yet is how a tool can help you. And of course, you can, you know, with the knowledge, with what I told you now, you can go to and you know, take a trace and dig through it in Wireshark, but that obviously requires a lot of time, because you're looking, you know, for streams that you wouldn't expect, or for packets, single individual packets that that are unusual. And so let me just very quickly show you 2-3 cases of our tool Qrystal, and how it can be used to find and solve one-way voice issues. I won't go into, you know, any of the details here. So I mean, there's lots of functionality that I could talk about. Actually, the only thing that we will do here is search for individual calls or streams, and you know, use these tools here in the analyze section. So typically what you get in operations is, you know, you get a ticket, a customer complaint, called the support and complained about one-way voice. You have a phone number and a time. And so let's try and play the game. And so we can search for a call or for the CDR. And so in this case, we have the user that complained at the number 55555-100, and the time was 20:04, so 8 p.m., 4 past 8 p.m. German time. And so I'll click search, and here we already found the call. You see some highlights or details from the CDR here. You can change all this, but we don't need to go into this. We just let's see, so 2004, as I said, so, and this is the calling number 555-100. So that's our CDR that we're looking for. We will come into some of this, come back to some of this later on. But what you need to know here is that the system performs automatic checks on the quality and on a lot of different issues related to the SIP signaling and the RTP streams. And the fact that you see here everything is green and everything here else is grayed out actually means that from that perspective the stream was fine. So I will just go to this tab, to the related tab, and again here you see the CDR that we're currently looking at. Below here you see the XDR, so that's all the signaling the signaling at the different monitoring points as it was measured. And below here you see the related RTP streams. So in this case we have contributing to this CDR is one XDR, so one signaling measurement, and two RTP measurement. And actually, you already see here in the back that there's something funny. So we have the upper one is the stream from the A to the B party, and the lower one is the stream from the B to the A party. And as you can see, the B to A ended a lot before the actual end of the call. And remember, the signaling was fine. So actually, we have a case of blocked RTP packets here. So let's see, where do we have the? No, we don't see it here. But actually, we have the timeline here. So you could say about 30 seconds of audio is missing. Or the A party couldn't hear the B party for the last 30 seconds roundabout. And actually, this is also automatically detected, so I can go back and do again a call search as we did before, but this time not for a specific phone number or a specific time, but let's here we search for this criterion single-sided call. And so here in this time slot, they found nothing, but here, this is the one we just looked at, 2004, but there was also one before, 1934 and 1904. So, by the way, this is like our demo system. You may have seen from the naming of the probes. These calls, that's why we have them in here regularly and can search for them. So this is basically one case. So the system automatically detects those calls where either RTP stream ended, I think by default it's 15 seconds, but it can be customized 15 seconds before the end of the signaling, so before the buy came. So in this is then flagged as single-sided call case. Let's have a second look at the, you remember the case with the two Swedes in Germany. So here we were looking at RTP streams which had a too low hop count. So let's do a stream search, which looks quite similar, but has different search criteria that you can use here. And you see here the search criteria on hop count. And so here for this case, we'll just search for streams which have a hop count of less than 8. And so here we have one. So this was a call taking place at 20:05, was a minute long, and you see the calling and call party numbers. And so let's have a look at this stream that could be correlated to a call. And I'll just go here onto the stream details. You see that there's lots of information extracted from the RTP packets and the IP, UDP, and RTP headers. But the only thing right now that we're interested in is the hop count, and as you can see that this stream, or the packets of this stream have a hop count of 6. So actually you see 3 numbers because every packet can take its own path, and sometimes that really happens. And then we're looking here at the minimum, average, and maximum hop counts of all the packets that we've seen here. Good. Just one final case, and that's coming back to this case of unexpected packets, and I hope that this will show you how much experience actually also is needed and is implemented here in this tool. So let's say again we have the case of a customer complaining. So here, and this time the call was at 2015. And you see here we have 2 calls in this time period that we just searched, both with the calling number of that we just searched for, and we said the call was at 2015, and you already see here that this is not green. Yellow is already an indication that something unusual has happened. So let's have a look at the CDR. And actually, if you remember the stream that we looked at, it had all the different indicators that we see here, only that here we're looking at a CDR, so at the call details. And in the call, you have 2 directions, A to B and B to A party. And what we see here is that the A to B party stream actually seemed to have an issue, which we call sender restart. And so I'm just click that, and now we're looking at the stream with this issue, and I can do a further drill down. And again, you see here, this is, if I click that signaling information, you would see that this is exactly the call that we were just looking at. And again, here we have this yellow sender restart indication. And what you see here is the summary for the entire stream, and now it could be interesting to know when this happened, and I can do a further drill down. And now I'm looking at a 5-second time slice that had actually the issue of the sender restart. So you see here, we're looking at a 5-second time slice from 2015 and 15 seconds to 2015 and 20 seconds. And the first sequence number in that RTP stream segment was 41,000 something, and the last sequence number was 232. And obviously this should not happen. As I said, the RTP sequence numbers should always be increasing. So much for the demo. I mean, there would be other cases which I could continue talking, but let's just wrap up because we already have used up some time. So just to reiterate, we have we talked about 4 root causes or 4 categories of one-way calls. That's missing RTP stream data, missing packets because of blocking or dropping in the network. We have the case of silent payload where all the packets arrive, etc., but either media gateway or straight away the sender had an issue and is not sending audio as it should. We have third reason, too many RTP streams, multiple RTP streams, and the receiver has to choose one of them and often chooses the wrong one. And finally, what we just talked about, the irregular RTP streams. So RTP streams which are a bit off the norm. And actually, Actually, I didn't want to do that, but let's just go back just to show you one thing. So sequence numbers can not only jump back to 0, 1, they can also have huge forward jumps with the RTP timestamp sort of behaving as expected. You could have irregularities in the RTP timestamp, which could also cause the receiver to say, this looks funny, I'm not going to play this out. You could have things like malformed packets, which can cause the receiver, we've had cases where this actually caused the receiver to crash. So let's say having the extension bit in the header set, but having no extension header, that can cause an RTP stack to go rogue. So this is, like I said, this is the magic that saves a lot of work, because all of this is when you know these issues that can happen in live networks. It's easy and to know and remember, but it's really hard to find and dig through in Wireshark or any tool that doesn't really check for the RTP. So like I said, knowing the reasons of one-way voice is helpful. But to actually solve these issues, it's also helpful and time saving if you have a tool that does a lot of the work for you. And as I showed you in Qrystal, a lot of the experience that we gained, a lot of the funny stuff that we saw over the years is checked for automatically, and you can even do statistics and see that there was a rise in sender restarts over the past week and things like this. So stuff that we didn't look into. But so that will actually help you qualify the root cause and also quantify the impact. So because, like I said, the ratio in that one case where we knew was about 1 to 100. I think in real life networks it's probably even 1 to 1,000 of incidents versus people reporting this issue. And so actually, when you solve one of these, you're actually helping a lot of people, and it helps you regain control of your network and service. And for this, thank you for your attention, and yeah, back to Eric.
Thank you, Michael. Some great informative stuff there. Hopefully, everybody in our audience has already gotten some valuable information. But I did promise that we have some time for Q&A. So why don't we get to some of those questions now? Um, um, so, Michael, can you monitor an increase in one-way voice and generate or create statistics from that?
Yes, there is one thing that I didn't mention. There are cases where the actual where I mean, if we see in the network that there are no packets, then you can be sure that it's one-way voice. So and that you can monitor, and the system you can also even alarm on an increase or passing of a threshold of one-way voice incidents. There's also other reasons, like the what I mentioned, the sender restarts, where it's actually depending on the receiver. So there, yes, you also get the numbers that some specific technical anomaly, let's call it, happened, and maybe that there was even an increase. But there, it's not easy to actually, translate this directly into actual one-way voice incidents, because it depends on the receiving device what happens in these cases. But generally, yes, clear is.
Thank you, Michael. You at one point you mentioned something about 5-second slices. What are you measuring every 5 seconds?
Yeah, that's a good one. The Qrystal is it's from its origins monitoring RTP data. So I mean, we have all the typical signaling stuff, call flow diagrams, etc. So what what you get even with a simple tool like VoIP Monitor. So, but what makes the system unique is that it's actually looking at each RTP packet and doing its analytical stuff. And to be able to cope with the amount of data, and so that you don't end up sort of like in a Wireshark situation where you're looking at individual packets, what we do is, or what the probes do is, they segment RTP streams into 5-second time slices and basically do the analysis on these 5-second chunks. And that helps to reduce I mean, it's a nice compromise between temporal detail and the storage requirements that you would need if you wanted to store, let's say, RTP packets of the past 2 weeks or so. So here when we size systems, we give retention times of 2 to 6 weeks, or so for a longer period of time, you can dig through old calls and get all the technical details of RTP streams without needing to look at individual packets. So this is basically the secret sauce of Qrystal, this time slicing approach.
Great, thank you, Michael. So when you were talking about the example of single-sided voice, you showed a situation where the stream from A to B ended before the stream from B to A.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how that helps find the root cause of the issue and where the problem in the network lies?
Yeah. You saw I mentioned that we were looking at data from a demo system. So here the amount of information was helpful in the sense that you know that this was a missing RTP packets, basically case one single-sided voice, but it didn't tell you which network element actually stopped the transmission, or where things went south. And in a real life network with our customers, we typically see each stream 4 to 6 or even 8 times. So as it's coming from, let's say, an enterprise customer, you see it on the south side of the SBC, then you see it on the north side of in the core side of the SBC, traversing the VoIP service providers network, and then eventually, again on south and north side of the egress SBC. So you have a couple of measurements of the same stream of the same RTP packets, and if you see that on the incoming side all the packets are there, and on the outgoing side suddenly packets are missing, then you know that you need to look into your network. If the packets are already basically blocked before your network, then you will see this immediately also, and you know that you don't need to check your own stuff. You need to talk to your enterprise customer, your interconnection partner, or whoever's sending you this sort of traffic.
Thanks, Michael. Couple folks here asking where they can go to find more information on Qrystal.
Well, first of all, you can go to our website, www.voipfuture.com. But you can also contact our sales, and specifically Lior Penn. You see the email address down here, and we can then arrange for an individual uh, workshop or webinar and talk about other things about this topic and also Qrystal in more detail.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. That really takes us to the end of the time that we have for the Q&A today. I know that the Voipfuture team answered some additional questions directly, and if there are any that we haven't been able to get to yet, or if there are additional questions, I know the team will be more than happy to get to those offline following today's event. And again, if you have additional questions or want more information, or want to specifically talk about your network and potential problems and ways to resolve them with Voipfuture's contact information will be coming to you tomorrow as well. So with that, like I said, we're out of time for today. I want to thank everybody in our audience for taking time out of your busy days. Hopefully this was helpful for you. And Michael, thank you so much for sharing some of your expertise with us. Hope to see you
You're
again
welcome.
soon. Thank you, and have a fantastic afternoon, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.